Have you ever wondered why the more bait you put on your hook, the fewer fish you actually seem to catch? It sounds completely backwards, does it not? We were all taught by our fathers and grandfathers that big bait equals big fish, and that you must hide every single piece of the metal hook or the fish will get spooked. But what if I told you that this classic old-school advice is the exact reason you keep missing strikes and reeling in empty hooks? In this video, we are going to uncover a hard truth about your fishing tackle. We are going to reveal why building a giant, beautiful ball of bait is actually creating a physical barricade that makes it impossible to hook a fish. Prepare to have your habits challenged, because we are breaking the rules today. Let me ask you right now, do you still obsess over hiding your hook point, or have you figured out the secret? Let me know in the comments, and let us get into the truth about baiting your hook. This topic is absolutely crucial because missed strikes are the single most frustrating part of fishing. You spend hours sitting on the bank waiting for that one glorious moment when the bobber drops or the rod tip bends, and when you finally set the hook and feel nothing but empty water, it drives you crazy. For decades, the fishing community has been held hostage by the belief that fish are underwater geniuses. We assume they can spot a tiny sliver of metal from 3 feet away and will refuse to eat. Because of this paranoia, anglers spend years doing the exact same thing. They stuff, pack, and thread massive amounts of bait onto their hooks, desperately trying to camouflage the metal. But by trying to solve a visual problem that does not actually exist, they create a massive mechanical problem. It is time to look at the physics of fishing instead of the myths. Let us start with a familiar scene. It is early morning on your favorite lake. The water is perfectly calm, covered in a light mist. You are standing on the bank, drinking hot coffee, getting your gear ready for the first cast of the day. You open your bait box. Whether it is a fresh batch of worms, some sweet corn, or your secret recipe dough bait, you want to make a good impression on the fish, so you grab a massive handful. You start threading, packing, and stuffing as much of that bait onto your hook as humanly possible. You build a giant meatball of goodness, completely burying the metal. You look at it and think to yourself, this is exactly what a big fish wants. A massive, juicy meal. You cast it out feeling proud. But here is the harsh truth. That giant ball of bait is exactly why you're going to go home empty-handed today. You just ruined the mechanics of your tackle. The bigger the bait, the better the catch, right? Wrong. This is the first trap we fall into. We let our human appetite dictate how we fish. We think a buffet on a hook equals success. But fish do not look at a hook like we look at a dinner plate. By making that bait so thick and heavy, you just created a protective shield around the most important part of your gear. Let us talk about the psychology of the meatball approach. You see, fishermen are generous by nature. We want to offer the fish an irresistible feast. We have all heard the old saying that big bait equals big fish. So we take 3 or 4 fat night crawlers and loop them over and over until the hook is totally invisible. We want to hide every single millimeter of that metal. Why do we do this? Because somewhere along the line, somebody convinced us that fish are brilliant metal detectors. We were taught that if a fish sees a tiny speck of a hook point, it will instantly swim away in terror. So we pack the bait tight, we make sure nothing sharp is poking out, we feel confident that the fish will only taste the food. But think about what happens next. The bobber goes down, the rod tip bends, you rear back and set the hook with all your strength. You feel a heavy weight for a split second, and then the line goes completely slack. The fish is gone, your bait is gone. You stand there wondering what went wrong. You blame the fish for being tricky. You blame your line. You never stop to think that your overly generous baiting strategy is exactly what caused that fish to escape. To understand why this is a massive mistake, we need to look at the anatomy of a fishing hook. Look at any hook in your tackle box. It has an eye, a shank, a bend, a barb, and a point. That point is engineered to do one specific job. It is designed to pierce flesh with minimal effort. But for that point to do its job, it needs clearance. It needs empty space around it. This empty space is called the gap. The gap is the distance between the shank of the hook and the sharp point. When a fish bites, that gap is what allows the flesh of the fish to slide down and meet the sharp metal. Now imagine what happens when you stuff that entire gap full of dense dough bait or a massive wad of thick worms. You have completely eliminated the clearance. You have filled the gap with a physical barricade. The hook point is now buried inside a soft, squishy fortress. When you pull on the line to set the hook, the point cannot grab the lip of the fish. Instead, it just pulls the entire ball of bait right out of the mouth of the fish. The hook point never even touches the fish. It is like trying to hammer a nail into a piece of wood while wearing a thick winter glove over the hammerhead. It just will not work. Let us break down the physics of a hook set when you use too much bait. Picture the scene underwater. A nice fish swims up to your giant bait ball. It flares its gills and sucks the whole thing into its mouth. The fish closes its jaws tightly around your bait. Up on the bank, you see the bite. You sweep the rod back hard. The line gets tight. The hook starts to move forward inside the mouth of the fish. But remember, your hook point is buried deep inside a thick layer of bait. For the metal point to reach the flesh of the fish, it first has to punch through all the bait you packed around it. If you are using tough worms or tightly packed dough, that takes a lot of force. Most of the energy from your hook set is wasted completely. It is spent trying to rip the hook out of your own bait rather than driving it into the fish. By the time the point finally breaks free from the bait, the hook is already sliding out of the mouth of the fish. The fish spits out the mangled mess and you reel in a bare hook. You shake your head and tell your buddy that they are biting light today. They are not biting light. You just created a shock absorber around your hook point. This brings us to the ultimate grandpa myth of fishing. We all know this myth. You must hide the metal. Countless generations of anglers have been taught that fish are terrified of hooks. We imagine fish swimming around, inspecting our bait with a magnifying glass, looking for any sign of danger. If they see a tiny silver point sticking out, they will laugh at us and swim away. This is pure nonsense. Fish do not know what a hook is. They do not understand the concept of metal hooks. When they see a hook point protruding from a piece of corn or a worm, they do not think it is a trap. They just see a tiny piece of debris. Maybe they think it is a small twig or a piece of a shell or a little bug leg. Fish eat things with sharp, crunchy parts all the time. Crayfish have sharp claws. Snails have hard shells. Bugs have spiky legs. Fish are not afraid of hard, pointy things. The fear of the exposed hook point is entirely in the head of the fisherman. We hide the hook because it makes us feel better, not because the fish care. And in our obsession to hide the metal, we completely ruin the functionality of our gear. It is time to let go of this outdated, old-school paranoia. Let us take a closer look at how fish actually feed underwater. It is quite different from how we eat a sandwich. A fish does not have hands to grab food. Most fish feed by creating a sudden vacuum. They open their mouths quickly and suck in water, pulling the bait inside. Once the bait is in their mouth, they crush it with their jaws or throat teeth. If your bait is a massive, heavy lump, it behaves differently in the water. It is unnatural. A fish might try to suck it in, but because it is so heavy and bulky, it does not easily fly into the back of their mouth. They end up just holding the edge of your giant meatball in their lips. When you set the hook, you're only pulling the bait away from them because the hook itself is buried somewhere in the middle of that giant wad. If you used a smaller, lighter piece of bait, it would instantly shoot straight into the mouth of the fish when they inhale. A smaller bait presentation ensures the hook actually enters the danger zone. When you overload the hook, you are essentially making your bait too clumsy for the fish to eat properly. You are making them work too hard for their meal and giving them an easy way to escape. There is a huge difference between a proper bait presentation and building a barricade. A good presentation is all about looking natural while keeping your tackle effective. Think of a single, lively worm hooked just once or twice through the middle. The ends of the worm are wiggling freely. It looks exactly like a worm that just fell into the water. Most importantly, the hook point is fully exposed and ready to bite flesh. Now, contrast that with the barricade method, taking 3 whole worms, hooking them 10 times each, and squeezing them into a tight, miserable knot. It does not look like anything found in nature. It looks like a mop head, and worse, it functions like a shield. You have built a barricade of meat that the hook point cannot escape from. When you fish with a barricade, you are relying entirely on blind luck. You are hoping that the fish will swallow the bait so deep that the hook eventually finds a soft spot in the stomach. But if you want to hook fish in the lip or the corner of the mouth, which is exactly where you want them, you need an open, aggressive hook point. Stop building walls around your hooks. Let the sharp metal do exactly what it was designed to do. We have all experienced this tragic scenario. You are sitting in your chair watching the water. The sun is shining. Suddenly your bobber gives a little twitch. You lean forward. Your heart beats a little faster. Then the bobber plunges straight down into the dark water. It is a solid take. You wait 2 seconds, you grab the rod, sweep it back and hit a brick wall. The fish is on. It pulls hard. The rod bends in a beautiful arc. You reel in a few feet of line, feeling like a champion. Then out of nowhere the tension vanishes. The rod snaps straight. The line goes limp. You reel in your rig and your giant ball of bait is just slightly mangled. What happened? I will tell you exactly what happened. The fish grabbed your massive bait ball. It clamped its jaws down hard on the squishy exterior. When you pulled, you did not set the hook into the fish. You just dragged the bait forward until it got wedged against the teeth of the fish. You were literally fighting the fish by pulling on the bait it was holding in its teeth. But because the hook point was buried, it never caught flesh. The moment the fish opened its mouth, you lost the battle, all because of a buried hook. Let us talk specifically about fishing with worms. This is where most people make the fatal error. They buy a box of huge, thick night crawlers. They take one out, pierce the head, pull it up the shank, pierce it again, and repeat this process until the entire hook is covered. The gap of the hook is completely stuffed with thick worm skin. Nightcrawler skin is actually quite tough. It is rubbery and elastic. When a fish bites that wad of rubbery worm and you pull back to set the hook point has to pierce through multiple layers of that tough skin before it ever reaches the fish. Most of the time the point gets caught on the worm itself. It turns inward, snagging the very bait you put on it. And this is a classic case of defeating your own tackle. Instead of doing this, try hooking the worm just once through the middle. Let it dangle, let it wiggle. Yes, the hook point will be completely naked and visible, but the action will be incredible, and when a fish sucks that worm in, there is absolutely zero rubbery skin blocking the hook point. The metal is instantly ready to grab the lip. You will notice an immediate increase in your hookup ratio. Less worm, more exposed metal. The same rules apply to dough baits and sweet corn. Carp and catfish anglers are notorious for this mistake. They mix up a beautiful batch of scented dough smelling like garlic or strawberry. They pinch off a piece the size of a golf ball and mold it tightly over a relatively small hook. They pack it incredibly hard so it will not fly off during the cast. They bury the hook so deep inside that dough ball that it would take a hammer and chisel to find it. They think the fish will gently suck on the dough until the hook magically catches, but dough bait turns into a dense paste underwater. It acts like wet clay. When you set the hook, the point just drags through that heavy clay, gathering a little clump of it right on the very tip. So now even if the hook reaches the mouth of the fish, the point is covered by a tiny, hard cap of dough. It cannot penetrate. With sweet corn, people will thread 5 or 6 kernels onto a single hook, filling the entire curve and gap. The point rests inside the last kernel. When you pull, the hook point just spins inside the corn. If you want to catch more fish, leave the hook point completely outside the dough or the corn. We needed to deeply examine the exposed hook point myth. Do fish actually see the metal and get scared? Let us think about the visual acuity of a fish in muddy or stained water. Most of the time, visibility is only a few feet or even a few inches. The fish is relying on its lateral line to feel vibrations and its sense of smell to find the food. By the time it gets close enough to even see the bait, it is acting on pure instinct. It sees a blob of color and smells a rich scent. It does not possess the cognitive reasoning to look at a small silver point and say, wait a minute, that is a high-carbon steel wire manufactured in a factory. The fish just sees the food and attacks. Even in crystal-clear water, an exposed hook point does not deter fish. Fly fishermen catch the most easily spooked trout in the world using tiny flies where the entire bend and point of the hook are hanging completely exposed below the feathers. If an old, wise brown trout in a crystal-clear mountain stream is not afraid of an exposed hook point, the catfish or bluegill in your local muddy pond certainly does not care. Stop worrying about the fish seeing the hook. Worry about the hook not working. Another huge problem with putting too much bait on the hook is the camouflage mistake. Anglers think that by making the bait massive, they are hiding the danger, but in reality, they are making the presentation look totally unnatural. Think about a single piece of corn resting lightly on the bottom of a lake. It looks natural. It looks like a single piece of food that was dropped by a passing duck. Now imagine a giant, unnatural cluster of 8 corn kernels glued together in a perfect ball around a piece of metal. It looks suspicious. It is heavy, it does not move naturally in the water currents, and it rests on the bottom like a lead weight. And you are essentially creating a visual red flag for the fish. When you reduce the amount of bait on the hook, you allow the bait to act naturally. A single kernel of corn wafts slightly in the undercurrent. A small piece of worm flutters. This natural movement is the ultimate camouflage. The fish focuses entirely on the natural movement of the food. It completely ignores the hook point sticking out of it. By trying so hard to hide the hook with bulk, you actually draw negative attention to the weird, unnatural behavior of your bait. Let us talk about the relationship between hook sizes and bait sizes. Matching the hatch is a common term, but matching your bait to your hook is even more critical. If you are determined to use a giant piece of cut bait or a massive dough ball, you absolutely must use a massive hook. You need a hook with a gap so wide that even after you put the giant bait on, there is still plenty of clearance for the point to find flesh. But what most people do is use a medium-sized hook and completely overload it. This destroys the mechanical ratio. A size 6 hook can only hold a small piece of worm or 1 kernel of corn if you want it to function properly. If you put a golf ball-sized piece of dough on a size 6 hook, you have reduced the effectiveness of that hook to 0%. It is simple geometry. The distance from the point to the shank must always be significantly larger than the thickness of the bait you put on it. If the bait fills the gap, the hook is useless. Always check the clearance before you cast. Press your finger lightly against the hook point. If you only feel soft bait and you cannot instantly feel the sharp sting of the metal, you have too much bait on. Consider the subtle bite. Not every fish is a ravenous monster that strikes like a freight train. Very often, especially in cold water or under high fishing pressure, fish become incredibly delicate biters. They will approach your bait, nip at the edges, or gently take it just inside their lips. If you have a massive ball of bait hiding your hook point, you will see a tiny twitch on your rod tip. You might strike, but you will hit nothing but water. The fish was only holding the very edge of your oversized bait. The buried hook was inches away from its actual lips. Now imagine you have a very small piece of bait on the same hook, with the point completely exposed and aggressive. When that delicate fish gently sucks in the small morsel, the bare hook point slips right inside its mouth. Even the slightest twitch of your rod tip is enough to drive that exposed point directly into the soft tissue of the lip. You convert those tiny, annoying nibbles into solid hookups. Heavily baited hooks require the fish to completely commit and swallow the entire mass. Small baits with exposed points catch the lazy fish, the shy fish, and the smart fish that only take a quick taste. We need to hammer home the concept of the hook gap. I cannot emphasize this enough. The hook gap is sacred. It is the most vital, functional area of your entire fishing setup. You can have the most expensive carbon fiber rod in the world. You can have the smoothest reel with incredible drag. You can have invisible fluorocarbon line. But if you ruin the hook gap, all of that expensive gear is completely useless. The gap is the capture zone. When a fish closes its mouth, the flesh pushes against the shank of the hook. This pressure forces the lip to slide down toward the point. If there is a huge piece of tough worm skin blocking that path, the flesh stops sliding. The point never engages. You must treat that empty space between the point and the shank as a no-go zone for bait. Thread your bait on the shank. Wrap your dough lightly around the eye of the hook. Do whatever you want to the back end of the hook, but leave the gap empty and leave the point dangerously exposed. This simple mechanical adjustment will literally double your catch rate. It turns near misses into guaranteed hookups. Do not let your own bait sabotage the capture zone. Keep that gap totally clean. Think about the sharpness test. Every good fisherman knows to check their hook points. You drag the point lightly across your fingernail. If it digs in instantly and scratches the nail, it is sticky sharp and ready to fish. If it slides across the nail, it is dull and needs sharpening or replacing. We obsess over having surgically sharp hooks. We buy laser-sharpened, chemically etched hooks that cost a fortune. But think about the sheer irony of this habit. We spend good money on the sharpest metal known to man. We test it carefully on our fingernails, and then what do? We bury that ultra-sharp point deep inside a sticky, dense, rubbery ball of bait. We take our laser-sharp weapon and put a heavy jacket over it. What is the point of having a razor-sharp hook if the fish never actually touches it? It is completely illogical. If you are going to take the time to ensure your hook is sharp enough to instantly grab flesh, you must give it the opportunity to do so. A sharp hook means absolutely nothing if it is hidden. Expose the point. Let that chemical sharpening do exactly what you paid for. Let it instantly grab the lip of the fish the second it touches it. Adjusting your mindset is the hardest part of this entire process. As humans, we want to give more. We think less bait looks cheap. We look at a hook with a single kernel of corn on it, with the point completely bare, and we feel nervous. We think to ourselves, that does not look right. I need to hide that ugly metal hook. You have to fight that instinct. You have to train your brain to understand that less is actually more. in the fishing world. A sparse, minimal bait presentation is deadly. It is aerodynamic. During the cast, it sinks naturally, it flutters beautifully in the water, and most importantly, it leaves your primary weapon totally unblocked. The next time you are sitting on the bank getting ready to bait your hook, I want you to stop yourself. Take half of the bait you usually use and throw it back in the container. Put a small, neat piece of bait on the hook. Leave the entire point and barb completely naked and exposed. It will feel wrong the first few times you do it. Your grandpa would probably yell at you if he saw it, but you have to trust the mechanics over the tradition. Break the habit of overfeeding. Start rigging for penetration instead of comfort. I want you to try a real-world test the next time you are at the edge of the water. Do not just take my word for it. Prove it to yourself. Take 2 identical hooks. On the first hook, rig it the old school way. Bury the hook completely in a giant wad of dense dough or a thick knot of worms. Make sure the point is totally hidden. On the second hook, put a tiny piece of bait right on the shank, leaving the entire curve and point totally exposed. Now hold the fishing line in your left hand and use 2 fingers of your right hand to simulate the mouth of a fish. Gently pinch the first heavily baited hook between your fingers and pull the line. Feel how much force it takes to make that hidden hook point pop out of the bait and scratch your fingers. Now do the same thing with the second hook. Gently pinch it and pull the line. You will instantly feel that bare hook point dig into your skin with almost zero pressure. That is exactly what happens in the mouth of the fish. The difference in the amount of force required is mind-blowing. This simple physical demonstration will forever change the way you look at a baited hook. You will never want to bury a hook point ever again. If you still have doubts, spend some time watching the professionals. Watch the European carp anglers, who are arguably the most advanced bait fishermen on the planet. They use a technique called the hair rig. The bait is not even on the hook. The bait dangles below the hook on a tiny piece of string. The hook itself is completely bare. Every single millimeter of the metal is exposed, and they catch massive, highly pressured, incredibly intelligent fish consistently. Watch professional bass anglers using plastic worms. When they want to catch a fish, they make sure the hook point is just barely resting beneath the plastic, ready to pop out instantly with the slightest pressure. They call it being text-posed. They never bury the hook deep in the thickest part of the plastic without a clear path to exit. The best anglers in the world know that hiding the hook point from the fish is a rookie mistake. They prioritize hook penetration above all else. They understand that a fish does not fear a piece of metal, but a fisherman should definitely fear a blocked hook gap. Take a page out of the professional playbook. Stop treating your bait like a sleeping bag for your hook. Making this final transition to a new habit will dramatically improve your success on the water. It is time to step out of the shadows of old wives' tales and bad advice. The next time you walk down to the lake in the morning mist, carry a new confidence with you. When you open your bait box, do not look at it as a buffet to be piled onto your hook. Look at it as an accent. The bait is just the flavor, the scent, and the visual trigger. The hook is the tool. Never let the flavor block the tool. Thread your worm once, let it dangle, and leave the point aggressive. Pinch a small piece of dough, leave the point shining. You will notice that when the bobber goes down and you sweep the rod back, you will hit solid resistance much more often. You will stop bringing back mangled bait and start bringing back fish. You will realize that the fish never cared about seeing the metal. They only cared about the easy meal. By keeping your hook point exposed and dangerous, you are finally allowing your tackle to work exactly the way it was engineered to work. Trust the exposed point. It is the single greatest adjustment you can make to stop missing strikes and start landing more fish. So let us wrap this all up. We have completely dismantled the old myth that fish run away from exposed hooks. The biggest turning point in your fishing journey will be the realization that your own bait can act as a physical barricade, completely neutralizing your hook set. By learning to use less bait and keeping the gap of your hook completely clear, you allow the sharp metal to easily penetrate the lip of the fish. This one simple change in your mindset will transform those frustrating missed strikes into solid, reliable hookups. Thank you so much for hanging out and watching today. If this video changed the way you look at baiting your hook, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and drop a comment below. I want to hear from you. Are you going to keep burying your hooks like Grandpa taught you? Or are you finally ready to fish with exposed metal?